Get up and get out. Get out. Get out.
I have a question for you.
Say Christ is Lord. Say Christ is Lord. Say it. You say Christ is Lord. Get out. Get out. Christ is Lord.
Hello and welcome in to another episode of Offensively Accurate, hosted by yours truly, Atlas Thugged, aka White Boy D-Boys, aka another racially ambiguous griper. And I'm here to tell you that Jesus loves you and Christ is King, unfortunately alongside some pretty terrible things. And it's good to see everybody in here. Mr. Moz, Tix Bomber, 40 Wide, 40 Deep, Emily Allen, Hippocratic Oath, Romulus, Goin Nibs, and I might be missing somebody, or Smelly Balls isn't in here. AI World Champion, good to see everybody in here. I will say right off of the rip, I'm going to get this right out of the way. We're going to be a heavily focused episode today. We're taking a specific look at, obviously, the merger, the attempts and continual attempts of this Israeli-United States of America merger between both the military as well as the intelligence operations. We're also going to be taking a look at the authors of it, the origins of it, and the connections between Tom Cotton, Bill Kristol, the Claremont Institute, Paul Singer, Peter Thiel, and a lot more. I'll get you right out of the way. Second to that, the second thing I want to get right out of the way and announce too is I'm experimenting a little bit with the monetization. Now, I do have it set to manual. I would like you guys to notify me if it goes to ads at all, because I'm trying to figure out if the monetization is also a factor in the channel and show discoverability. So I know, I apologize. I hate doing it, but I'm just experimenting a little bit to see if there's any kind of change, any kind of real, I guess, marginal or significant change between viewership and numbers versus it being monetized or not monetized. So with that out of the way, also want to give a shout out, haven't done it in a couple streams, to NAV Metallurgy, the singular and sole sponsor of the show. Shout out to NAV Metallurgy, who makes some fantastic and wonderful looking tokens. They are great at 3D printing, and they also can make custom light boxes. Forgive me, I can remember what it was called. You can get one considered like offensively accurate, branded as such, but you can also get your own custom stuff as well. You can check them out at VanDerNoordLLC.com. They have been great. They are a great supporter of the show, and I appreciate them tremendously. So, with all of that out of the way, we're going to get right into it because I feel like there's a lot to cover. I have literally a bunch of notes here, and I also pulled a lot of stuff as well from my previous debate with Chuck Mason in connection with, where did he even come from? The American Reformer? I can't remember what. The American Mantle? I can't remember where he came from. Who cares? Doesn't matter. And so we're really going to be exposing Tom Cotton. The more I dug into Tom Cotton, I will be honest with you, the more I found that was curious why I had not had heard of it before. I know everybody kind of knows Tom Cotton as obviously a pro-Israel neocon, warhawk, if you will. Obviously, that is his primary and has been for some time. His primary considerations has been, affairs in the Middle East, writing open letters to Iran. But also, as I dug a bit deeper, I didn't even realize this until I'd actually caught wind of it from an older Tucker Carlson interview, where I realized that Tom Cotton is a protege of Bill Kristol. And Bill Kristol, obviously the son of Irving Kristol. Irving Kristol is considered the grandfather of, or forgive me, the grandfather, the godfather of neoconservatism. Neoconservatism, obviously neoconservative, neoconservatism, neo meaning new conservative, new conservatism. And what that means in effect, obviously, is a reflection and a, what would you call an incident that occurred in around 1973, 1974, when this was obviously the overwhelming reaction from Jews in America to the interactions of the USSR, the Soviet Union, as well as Egypt, Syria, and what was going on with Israel. Obviously, Israel was off the back of a rather devastating surprise attack, and this led to a lot of change of heart for many of the Jews in America and how they felt. Many of them abandoning their left-wing positions because their supreme principle was the continuation and the existence of the state of Israel. So a lot to get into in there. Even beyond that with Tom Cotton as well, he is actually the father of not what is being called, let me back up a little bit. Many of you are probably aware of this story that has been circulating, which is there is a merger on the table, both being talked about and legislated by both in the House and the Senate. And that is this merger between what was initially kind of reported was a military merger, as if like we're going to be combining the militaries to some effect. And so part of the reason why I didn't cover this in the beginning on the onset of the coverage was, for one reason, I wanted to have time to actually sit down and look at it and read through it. And the second thing with that was it seemed to be not as relevant because it was stuck in like procedural limbo. Part of this was because you have Ro Khanna and you have also then later on Thomas Massie, who are throwing their hats in the ring, saying this is ridiculous, this is nonsense, we can't be doing this. And because of that, I had actually been holding off, waiting until it got a little bit further and finding some more time when, again, it'd be a slow news day, to take the time to actually explain and expound on what I found in here. So I will go back a little bit. It is both a military merger as well as a intelligence service merger. So there's actually two aspects to this. One aspect is the military merger, and this is what was originally considered Section 224, which has now been renumbered to Section 219. And it just depends, I guess, on what version of the bill you're looking at or what time you're looking at the bill. And part of that being because some things have already been struck from it. And it's kind of, again, this procedural limbo. And it was Section 219, now Section 219, which is now titled the United States-Israel Defense Technology Cooperation Initiative. And the purpose of this is to essentially streamline the bilateral movements, discussions, supply chains, and technologies between both countries, between both Israel and the United States of America. Now, there are a few different things inside of there even that you could obviously go, that's insane. I will say this now at the top of the hour. When I put treason and traitors into the thumbnail, that was not a joke. I do think anyone and everyone who is supporting this and pushing for this deserves to be labeled as a treasonous traitor. That is actually how grotesque a lot of this is. Now, I'll stop right here and say, again, two parts to this. You have the intelligence agency element, which is actually only in the Senate, and that's being authored by Tom Cotton. That is considered Section 622, I do believe. I might not have that in front of me. We can get to it when we get there. And that is actually, there's no companion version of the intelligence merger inside of the House. So in the House, you have the military merger, but in the Senate, you have the intelligence agency merger. So there's two different aspects to this. The intelligence agency one I find to be way more grotesque, way more nefarious, and way more disturbing, to say the least. Anything that you would really even attribute to something that would be treasonous. And the reason why I say this is because of just all the lengths it goes to and the obligation, the statutory obligations it gives to the president, and also the significant hurdles and roadblocks it puts in front of anyone who would, if it were to pass, if they were ever to want to limit the information sharing with Israel. And so military merger is obviously with the supply chains, with the military, with the technology, and that goes to things like artificial intelligence, quantum computing, autonomous systems, unmanned aerial systems. But the intelligence agency merger is explicitly about the intelligence sharing, information sharing, the agency, what we can and cannot share, what we should be sharing with Israel, who and what can stop it. And when you look deeper into it, it is a rather grotesque, to me, overreach from a foreign nation, going back to, again, the George Washington, obviously, no foreign entanglements, but this is obviously, that cat's been out of the bag for quite some time. So going to the military merger, I guess I'll start here. It's probably the best point to start, which is the provision explicitly directs there to be essentially one executive, a single senior official who is this executive agent, as they say in the language, whose real position is to coordinate and synchronize the already existing and expanded bilateral efforts in the defense technology. And so I have a short list here. So this includes things like bilateral research, development, testing, evaluation, integration, and industrial cooperation. The second thing from this is the priority areas. And this is actually, it seems to be all hinging upon like new and emerging technologies, such as, again, artificial intelligence, which would be things like surveillance technology, Palantir, quantum computing, machine learning, and it just goes on and on and on. Even biotechnology and biomanufacturing. In some points, it even talks about the anti-tunneling or the subterranean threats, directed energy and advanced sensing, so many different things like that. It also gives requirements, too, for progress reports to Congress and coordination with other federal agencies, obviously to keep track and to see just how much and where to, and how to notify explicitly on what technologies, what's being shared, and what the status reports of those are. Beyond that, the critics of this have namely been saying, and the reason why this actually, maybe the more broader interpretation of this, is that what we have long been suspecting and really expecting, that's what's going to be happening, this change of the relationship between the United States of America and Israel, is obviously we have watched for probably the past, I don't know, maybe 5 years, basically since October 2023, but there has been some moments even before then. And the overall nature of the relationship between the United States and Israel in the public court of opinion, or the court of public opinion, forgive me, is that it has radically been reduced. It has been drained. The support that once was there is no longer. The opening of free speech platforms such as X, which is even, it's the best is what we have. It's not an entirely absolute free speech platform, obviously. But the support for Israel has been drowning. And a lot of this is recognized in the way that we have the AIPAC tracker, which we see those graphics all the time. You see it in the harsh red. You see people like Tom Cotton, Randy Fine, many others who are just receiving money, and some to the tune of millions of dollars being received by AIPAC, which is obviously the strongest foreign lobbying group in America, although it's not even treated as such. It's basically treated as if it's a domestic agency. The crazy part about it is that what we've kind of been expecting, and this goes in the line and the thought process of obviously this fifth column, this Jewish diaspora in America has been operating for some time. The idea inside of there, though, is that they obviously didn't just wake up one day and decide, and this is the way it was going to be, and everyone went along with it. This has actually been a long-standing process over many years, many decades, of different incidences and people being involved to influence it along the way. And so the thought process here is that this is obviously with many hands involved, many different people involved, and largely between just really two different nations. The idea has been, even if they were to get rid of the aid to Israel in terms of the $3.8 billion a year that's sent annually, as well as any other kind of emergency package that is obviously, overtly transparent. I mean, we see it all the time when it's posted about, send 50 billion to Israel. We see these different news stories. The idea has been, because there is this network of these individuals, and because they are so, what would we say, advanced in their networking or advanced in their plans, their foresight to understand what they need to be doing to be at least maybe one step ahead at all times. The idea that comes from that is, well, they would probably have some form of a plan B. They would have some form of an idea of, if even America did reach a point where the public, the average American, got to a point where they said,
"You don't seem to understand. Earth isn't yours to conquer."
What's up, Mitch?
Mitch sent $3. What's up, my?
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the power chat. I appreciate you, brother. The idea essentially would be that they would find a way to evolve the relationship. Evolving the relationship in terms of maybe it doesn't read as aid to Israel. Yeah, nice timing, right? And that's exactly what we are seeing with this merger. That's what this merger represents, both in terms of the military operation as well as its intelligence portion of it. These two different portions, these two different sections between one in the House and one in the Senate, and both of which actually had votes along the schedule related to both of these, which we'll get to when we get there.
You don't seem to understand. Earth isn't yours to conquer.
I appreciate it.
Sent $3. What's up, my nigga?
I appreciate that, brother. Thank you greatly. I'm glad you got it to say it, though, that time, actually. It's funny. Now everybody knows how to crack it. It's funny. But the point being is that's what this merger represents. This merger that's being voted upon and being attached to the SAVE Act, that's being attached overall to the NDAA, which is the National Defense Authorization Act, which is a annual bill that's put through, which determines what can be authorized, how it can be authorized, what gets funded, and what is the allotted amount, the budgets attached to it. So to put it simply, what this merger is doing is instead of keeping it at this kind of surface level, transparent, having to be passed as it's asked for or as it comes through the typical channels as it has been, this evolution, also an origin of this from Netanyahu has spoken about this publicly, is it goes from, instead of Israel being an aid recipient from the United States of America, Israel is now going to be a partner. Well, what does that mean? Well, in terms of our assistance and our support for Israel, in terms of the money and financial amount, it doesn't really mean it changes at all. What does change is the way that people talk about it, the rhetoric, and also by effect of how this language, the bill is actually operating in here. What it does is it kind of walks back the support for Israel behind Pentagon procurements, behind adding it and involving it and integrating it with the military apparatus of what the United States is, making it more difficult and more opaque to be able to understand and see what the different monies would be going to, who and for what reason. And so that is the general and broad critique, is that this is a very dangerous first step towards something that would ultimately take a lot of effort to repeal or get rid of. Because once you obviously start the integration, you open up your national security, you open up the information intelligence agencies in a legal way, obviously outside of what already occurs with the different blackmail operations and their already infiltration of what happens. And some of that can be even seen just early on with, in the Pentagon. I think it was the Department of Intelligence, one of the intelligence agencies put us on high alert or critical alert due to the fact of Israel stepping over some lines. Obviously, spying happens all the time. Allies spy on allies all the time, even those we don't consider to be allies. But this was a few months ago when they put us on critical alert due to what's going on currently with the Iran war. And you have the Pentagon going, hey, these guys are actually going much further than what they typically do in terms of spying on us. That aside, this bill stands to be the bridge to allow people like Randy Fine, Netanyahu, and many of these other pro-Israel pundits, the Zionists, to say, oh yeah, no, we don't support, financial aid to Israel anymore, but we do support this partnership merger between the United States and Israel. And that primarily has been one of their primary things of why they get the annual aid from us, is for their military expenditures. It is for their military operations. So on two ends, on one, it allows Randy Fine, and he's already spoken to this, and many others have too. It allows him to say, no, I don't support military aid. I don't support military aid to Israel. I don't think we should send $3.8 million. And he won't even need to say anything beyond that, because if the partnership is integrated together, well, then it'll just be a natural process of the Pentagon. It'll be a natural process of when we move to the next fiscal year of 2028, it'll already be included. It automatically just becomes a part of the budget, this streamlining. So while it doesn't add any new operation, it does streamline the process by basically integrating both the United States and Israel's military operation, the military supply chains, as well as the technology sharing, both in terms of military technology and also the general information apparatus, like in terms of national security and other elements like that too. So Netanyahu, going back to similar, I referenced Randy Fine, but Netanyahu himself has said explicitly this is moving from aid recipient to partner, much like what I said. So while it does operate on this rhetorical lens where people can kind of dance around the actual reality, the truth here, in effect, it does continue the problem and actually cements it into the system in a much more grotesque way than obviously what we would want. And the whole thing is just treasonous in general. So the House Armed Services Committee, let me read this portion, let me read this excerpt. The House Armed Services Committee advanced its NDAA version, which does include the provision, back in June on the 4th. And that was after defeating an amendment by Ro Khanna to strike the section completely. Now, Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie have been fighting this in the House. They've been making some joint efforts, trying to force some floor votes on the sections explicitly to actually just strike it from the bill entirely. And they're also facing some procedural hurdles by the Rules Committee. And so as of now, the full NDA process is continuing, but it is in a little bit of this procedural limbo. So the committee stage is over. It's just a matter of time before the full House votes on it. And that's one thing I've been paying attention to is like, when is it going to be, when is the entirety of this going to be scheduled up and put on the floor for these votes to continue this process? So that brings us to today. So today, what they did do in the House is they actually voted to attach the Save America Act, which talks about the voter ID in the proof of citizenship and needing voter ID to be able to vote. It attaches that, the Save Act, to the overall NDAA. So now it's kind of merging this. It's now this massive slop of a bill all being pushed together. And they did vote that. So that was what they voted on today. So it ties all this together. Now, the Senate, however, has a different version. The Senate version is further along because they weren't facing any of the procedural limbo or the forcing of votes by namely Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie, because the Senate doesn't really have anybody like that in it. So in their companion version of the bill, which is S 4784, is also labeled with their section in there, which is section 1217. So you have section, it's section 219 now, the House version. The Senate version is section 1217. And then today, the Senate also voted on this. But this is a bit of a brighter light, which is that the Senate rejected advancing the NDAA. It was like the vote was like 50 to 46. But the process is still in the early stages. So there's a good sign that because of obviously the current status of the Iran war, that many people may feel that they just simply need to rush it along or push it along to be able to prevent any kind of government lockdown or hiccups while we face perhaps being in another or really maybe for the first time, but an extended portion of the war. Obviously with the Iran war escalating and obviously with our current strategy, it's like, where else do we even go at this point? So the Senate's in the early stages. They did vote to reject it today, but the only issue is, again, because in the early stages, I can still see some shuffling of the board, some changing of some items, but I don't see any strong opposition to that specific section that was authored by Tom Cotton, who is a traitor to this country, who by all accounts should be charged with treason. If this was a just nation, Tom Cotton would be getting pulled into court and charged with treason. Will we see that? I have no idea. But again, one of the outside factors I think that plays into this is the fact that I do foresee, and I agree with Nick on this, that I do foresee this next step of the Iran war extending much further beyond the couple month periods. I don't foresee us coming back to the table for negotiations anytime soon. So what I will move to is to show you some reactions as well. I'm going to move to the watch screen here, and maybe actually pull this over for you guys as well. Let me swing this here. So Joe Kent, like he has been, Joe Kent actually continued. Let me actually scroll back up. I hate when it does this. Forgive me. Joe Kent had a bit of I would maybe consider it an alarmist tweet, but I think it was overall still good. And so what we'll read here, this is Joe Kent sounding the alarm bell, as he has been basically every single day he has walked away from his office, or since he walked away and stepped away from the Trump administration. You can read this here from him. He says, this week the Senate will vote to merge our military's most sensitive and secretive capabilities with Israel. This merger is buried within the massive NDAA, and they're hoping you won't notice. Merging our military with a foreign country is a treasonous betrayal of our sovereignty. Call your senators and tell them to vote no on the NDAA until the merger with Israel, Section 219 is taken out. Tell them that we will never support merging our military with a foreign nation. And so what's funny is he's referencing the House version, the Section 19, but he's telling you to call the Senate. This is why we need to do better in terms of our research and having our things all in order. Regardless, however, what I wanted to play for you is this bit from Fox News here. And the reason why I have this is because I want to show you, this is a recent segment from Fox News. It's from July 12th. This is a couple of days ago. And you're going to hear Benjamin Netanyahu repeat this phrase, this rhetoric, from aid to partner. So here it is.
Mr. Prime Minister, do you have a timeline by which you would like to see that U.S. foreign aid down to zero?
Yes. It's military aid, actually. Yeah, we were talking about beginning it this year and going for 10 years, but we might shorten it. And that was something, by the way, that I did when I was first elected and came to Congress. We had financial, not military support, but financial aid to Israel. And I said on my first speech before the joint session of Congress that we're going to bring it down to zero. And we did that in 10 years. Every year went down until it finally disappeared. We could talk about that model. We're talking about that with the administration right now.
Well, Prime Minister, will that drawing down of foreign aid from the United States to Israel be compensated by the proposal to have a merging of some sort between our Pentagon and your military?
Yeah, I'm calling it from aid to partnership. So we take away the money that is given to Israel, which is one part, but the other part is we co-invest in equal measures in the new technologies that are needed to give our military and your military the advantage. So
did you see that, like that bit of sleight of hand he did there? So what he says is he acknowledges that, yes, we're going from an aid recipient to a partner, but then the next thing that comes out of his mouth is, well, we're going to be co-investing into these technologies. Well, what does co-investing mean? Well, co means, if you listen to the Nick Fuentes show, it's kind of funny. Two, both together, meaning that the United States will be investing in what? Israel. So he does this bit of sleight of hand where they're, on one hand, they're saying, yes, we're going to be pulling down, no more of these aid packages, but at the same time, the United States is still going to be investing into Israel. So there's literally no difference. It is changing the dynamic of what we have typically come to understand. And for one, I think in two parts. One, this actually allows both him and people like Randy Fine and all the other Zionists like Larry Loomer to be able to use this rhetoric to their advantage to obfuscate the reality of what is actually happening. The second thing there is because so many people have actually gotten used to this dynamic that when the average person now is also going to be hard, it's going to be harder for them to be able to explain, or unless they do the research, be able to contend with people like Laura Loomer and others in terms of pointing out military packages, because they're going to say, well, no, we give this much aid. Laura Loomer goes, no, we don't do that anymore. We don't send these aid packages. And then the person's like, they're going to have to, unless they have the understanding of this evolution, what it's become, and or maybe even have access to like the Pentagon procurements and Pentagon documents, which I highly doubt, it becomes a much more opaque thing, a much harder thing to actually pull numbers up from. Meanwhile, the rhetoric, the ball for the rhetoric falls into the court of the Zionists, who now have a much easier time defending the relationship here, defending it by being able to point to this kind of who knows what number, unless we get further information, which I would imagine we will still see some of that, depending on how big some of these investments are, or if there's any kind of added bills that come alongside of this. But it is obviously a defense mechanism. It is an evolution of what the relationship is. Nothing is changing beyond the fact of that they are adapting to what has been happening over the last couple of years. They are defending themselves from the criticism. They are defending themselves. They are hiding and packing away the reality of the situation, which is that the United States of America has a disgusting parasitic relationship with the state of Israel. And Netanyahu here himself saying this. Now, the next thing I'd like to take you to is the idea origin. So where did this idea come from? This has actually been one of the things that many people have been talking about and pointing out from the beginning. And what was that? So I'm going to pull up this next section here, and this is also from Gen X Girl, who does some decent work. And I want to pull up this letter for you, because this letter was from Benjamin Netanyahu. In the highlighted portions, which I'll open this in a new tab to make it easier for everybody to see, you can see the highlighted portions. He's writing to Congressman Stutzman, forgive me. And you can see the top highlighted portion, this far corner over here, my plan. Netanyahu writes, I was glad to receive your proposed congressional resolution endorsing my plan to shift the framework for U.S.-Israel defense cooperation from aid to partnership. Now, skipping down here to this bottom section, I am heartened by your enthusiastic support for our plan to develop a new memorandum of understanding with the United States government that will draw down U.S. financial military assistance over the next decade and replace it with what you refer to as a new framework of joint defense cooperation, co-development, co-production, and mutual investment in areas including advanced missile defense, artificial intelligence on manned systems, cybersecurity, and next-generation military platforms. So again, in effect, it's all going according to plan. Whose plan? One could argue, and I would too, that this is actually also a lot of it being influenced by Netanyahu. And two, not to bring Charlie Kirk into this, but again, you remember this letter that was penned, this open letter from Kirk to Netanyahu. Well, what was it about? Well, this letter specifically was about trying to find these different ways and methods in which, and it was multi-pointed too, in which Israel could enhance its relationship with the United States, not in terms of increasing the amount of money being spent, but finding a way that they could better contend with the angry youth, or a better way to avoid being critiqued all the time. It was really a letter being written by Kirk, who was feeling the heat of all of the youth members from his chapters, who are beginning to heavily question the nature of the relationship, the dynamic of the relationship, and why it should even be existing at all. It seems that Netanyahu took this to heart, and this seems to be what the plan is, to evolve the relationship from what it is, from the AIPAC tracker, from the $3.8 billion annual aid and any other emergency packages, to just putting it behind the paywall, if you will, putting it and integrating it wholeheartedly with the Pentagon. So the next thing I'll take you to is the fact that Thomas Massie actually yesterday was talking about some of his newest plans to continue to strip this section from the bill. So I'll put this section up here. This Thomas Massie seems to be one of the only people who's actually fighting this and recognizes it for what it is. I'll go ahead and get rid of some of these here too so the computer doesn't blow up. But here's this from Thomas Massie. I believe this was from yesterday.
What's even more concerning is in the NDAA Section 219, which is going to start commingling our military supply chains and technology with Israel's. It doesn't make sense to do that with a country of 10 million people. But they've got that in the NDAA. I'm told that's not coming up this week, but we know it's going to come up sometime, probably sometime soon. And so I've offered an amendment to strip Section 219, it was called Section 224, from that bill.
And you've had success in the past with discharge petitions to push, legislation that leadership wasn't necessarily aligned with. Do you see that in the case of Israel, of these measures regarding Israel?
Well, they're going to give me a vote, so we don't have to do the discharge petition on the defunding in the State Department. As far as Section 219, I mean, that is a place where you could use a discharge petition, but you got to know that you're going to get 218 signatures, and that's rather difficult right now. We'll see how the defund vote.
So Thomas Massie responding specifically about that discharge petition, something that he has already utilized towards the Epstein files, acknowledging that actually this is going to be a harder thing to be able to get a discharge petition for. And I think, for probably obvious reasons, the Epstein files, it's a very easy thing for someone to say, yes, I definitely want to know those, because obviously if you're on the other side of that, it's just a terrible optics for you. You typically are going to get crushed. If it is public knowledge that you are somebody who actively voted to withhold the Epstein files or continue their protection of them. This obviously being a tad bit different, something that is going to be significantly harder to be able to get the discharge petition in operation or in effect for. So resetting again, that is all, again, referring largely to the military aspect of it. Now, believe it or not, I actually find that to be the least nefarious thing overall of this entire situation. Obviously nefarious, obviously disgusting, obviously treasonous, but I think what people aren't talking about is the other section that refers not to the military, but refers to our sharing of information between our intelligence agencies. So now we're moving over to the intelligence agency portion. Now, this is where I think it gets worse. So this is actually called Section 622, and this moves to fuse the intelligence services. So now fusing Mossad with the CIA, streamlining those processes, streamlining Mossad and the FBI, something that most people have already, especially in the dissident right, especially in the Israel critical crowd, have already imagined has been happening, but probably not in ink, probably not legislated in a actual document or a court document, but more so maybe on the underhanded side of making references or in the typical ways that these espionage networks typically work. It was authored by Tom Cotton. Tom Cotton is a pro-Israel goy. Tom Cotton is a protege of Bill Kristol. Bill Kristol is the son of Irving Kristol. Irving Kristol, again, being the godfather of neoconservatism. And so we're going to, as we walk through what first this intelligence agency portion does, we're going to get to actually who Tom Cotton is. And I also want to cover his connections to the Kristols, the overall connection to the Claremont Institute, and a little bit of his background to give you a bit better understanding of who Tom Cotton is. And it was surprising to me, the more I was doing some of this research, to actually see just how deep some of these ties are, and some things that I would have imagined for as long as I've been covering this stuff that I would have seen already. So I actually had to do some back digging. I did some back digging. I was actually pulling up even some old America First episodes from the AmericaFirst.plus website to actually be sure of some of this information. So this provision, so Section 622, on the Senate side, that's authored by Tom Cotton. I'll read this excerpt here. Is the provision in the Senate Intelligence Committee's Intelligence Authorization Act for fiscal year 2027. Now, that is a mouthful. And it is not part of the main Senate NDAA bill. So it is actually like an addition. Now, what's commonplace historically is that these additional sections typically do just get attached all together for final passage. So while it is technically not a part of the main Senate NDAA bill, historically, anything that kind of is attached to it or is seen as a secondary element typically is roped in altogether when they choose to vote for it on the final vote. So what it does do, I'm reading another excerpt here, what it does do is it amends the National Security Act of 1947 by adding a new section, 1115, titled United States-Israel Intelligence Sharing Enhancement. Now, the actual language of this bill explicitly actually directs, it's largely directed towards the president, and it directs the president to, quote, expand and enhance intelligence sharing with Israel. And so the list of topics is broad. We're talking about terrorism, cyber threats, sanctions evasions, adversarial technology proliferation, missile threats, unmanned systems, air and space domain awareness, and other regional security concerns. So basically anything and everything that would be related to national security. Now, the main key effect is actually that it makes it literally virtually impossible for the president or anyone to reduce or prevent or stop the intelligence sharing with Israel. Now, this is actually the main and most nefarious thing, and we'll read into some of this language here too. So here's the language of the bill. Quote, shall not be suspended, reduced, or otherwise material limited unless the president can determine or declares there is a, quote, specific and identifiable national security concern. Meaning that the president can't do anything once this is put into law unless there is a literal national security threat or something of that effect happening that would prevent, that would change some kind of circumstance with this. And even then, that feels like you would have to even you would have to argue against that statutory obligation. So that's so understand this. This is a law being put on the books directed at the president and the national security apparatus in large that makes it a crime for them to not share specific national security information with a foreign nation. How you could even talk about this in any other way besides this being an extreme act of treason, I don't know. But I agree with Clint Russell, and I'll get to his tweet here a little bit. Anyone who voted for this, or anyone who is supporting this, needs to go to prison for the rest of their life. This is one of the most disgusting things I've ever read in a bill or document since I've been covering politics. To essentially make it that it is that the status quo is that Israel just has essentially full access to all of our national security information is violently in opposition to the values and foundation of what this nation was built upon. Again, we're going to get to Clint Russell's tweet here in a second because he does reference the founding fathers and what they would be doing in response to this. But here's even another addendum to this bill. It goes further. It even requires the White House to have to inform Congress within 15 days if there is any material change. And that even refers to if it's going to increase the amount of information we're going to share with Israel. So whether we increase the information, we decrease it, we change some kind of rate of it, it gets suspended, it gets altered. Congress, or the White House, forgive me, the White House has to go out of their way to give a 15-day notice so Israel can be prepared. So, in short, it creates a statutory obligation to expand sharing of our national intelligence with a foreign nation. And beyond that, it puts these extreme procedural limitations on who and what could even stop it. So this is one of these bills that once it's set in motion, good luck getting it back. So again, I repeat, whoever, whatever continues to support this, if we were in a just nation, they would be getting pulled from their seats wherever they were and yanked in front of a court and tried for treason and being investigated of why and how they are equalizing a foreign nation's interest to the level of America's or beyond so. Now I'll go further. I'm going to pull up the Clint Russell tweet because I think it actually is extremely poignant to this issue here. So I'm going to pull this up here. It jumped around again, forgive me. This is Clint Russell, who is a libertarian, but I do agree with him on some things, maybe not all the time, but I do agree with him on a lot of things. He writes that our founders would have hunted down and brutally murdered any politician that voted for the upcoming NDAA with Section 219, not hyperbole, they all would have. So understand, and Tix makes a great point, so understand we have basically gone in the short period, in the last couple of years, we have gone from being inundated with throwing people out of this country, extending the majority of our deportation efforts in the very beginning towards college campuses, towards Palestinians, for Lord even knows who, for writing op-eds and being critical of Israel. It was very murky there in the beginning. Then both before that and after, you have the HR 6090, which was being pushed and promoted in multiple different states and also being wielded even in other districts as well, which HR 6090 was a House resolution that was meant to get passed, where it would literally strike, it would consider certain portions of the Bible to be hate speech. And what were they using it for? What was the operating element of this? Well, they were going to be using the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's working definition of what anti-Semitism is, which has about 18 different bullet points to it, and they can change it at will. Hence the working definition. Now fast forward again. Now what happens? Well, we're at war. We're having war with Iran. Why? Well, because when you have the Miriam Adelson and Paul Singer-backed Trump administration alongside the Peter Thiel, Rockbridge Network, Claremont Institute, Manhattan Institute entity that is J.D. Vance, Peter Thiel, and everyone else, all coming together to go big and go fast against Iran. Obviously, Israel being the driving force for this war against Iran, because obviously Israel's primary motive is the Greater Israel Project. It is to achieve hegemony in the region. Well, now we're at war with Iran, and now it's looking even worse than what it has been, and with no off-ramp, nuclear warfare, ground invasion. I'm sure we're going to see something soon. And then to top it all off, what we have, while the war is literally ongoing, while this nation who's drug us into this war, as they have many times before, they are dragging us into this war. And at the same time they're dragging us into this war, we're getting the Pentagon is sending alerts. It's from different intelligence agencies. I'm forgetting the specific one off the top of my head. They're putting us on high critical alert. Like red flag. Israel is doing insane things to try to spy on us. They're placing things in secret service vehicles. They're going above and beyond to try to listen into communications between Trump and Rubio. And at the same time this is all going on, you have Tom Cotton, the traitor that he is, says, you know what I think would even make this all better? How about we force this country to share its information with Israel? It almost came in the same week that you have this alert, this report that they put together that actually goes beyond just this last year. It went all the way back to 2021 from what Israel's been doing. You have Tom Cotton standing on top of that going, and you know what we should do? Forget the high alert that we're in. We should mandate it. We should force it. And instead of and on top of forcing it, we should make it procedurally impossible for any president, whether it's Trump or anyone else who holds this position, to be able to stop it or to find a way to suspend it, limit it, or in any other way alter it. That is what's been going on in this country. And it could not be more obvious, more overt. And if anyone's been paying attention to politics for the last, couple of years, you would be able to just simply open your eyes and look and see what is going on. So, obviously egregious, but we are way past egregious. Strike one would have been the Middle Eastern wars, the Afghan war, the Iraq war. That would have been strike one. But even if you zoom up to we catch up to regular speed. Strike two is HR 6090. Strike two is people in this country, in this nation, thinking that having the audacity, the chutzpah, the gall to go, we're going to criminalize, we're going to call certain portions of the Bible hate speech. We will label you if you attempt to post Revelation 2:9, Revelation 3:9. Strike three should have been the Iran war. Now we're on strike four. Strike three, you're out. And I know let's go one step further. I'm being exceptionally charitable to even limit to those items as being the three strikes, let alone the Epstein files, let alone the stealing of the nuclear triggers, let alone the smuggling of the nuclear material out of the Midwest. And I can't understate how insane it is that you have intelligence agencies in this country screaming, slamming the big red button, going, hey, they're spying on us at an insane rate. This is going incredible. This is too much. We're throwing the flag on the field. They're going above and beyond. They're violating our don't got to say what's understood rules of espionage. And Tom Cotton goes, I'll handle it. I'll force it. I'll force this country to give up our national security information to this foreign nation that, by all accounts, is a terrorist nation. Hell, they invented terrorism. They were founded by 3 different terrorist organizations: the Haganah, the Lehi, and the Irgun. And the Lehi is just essentially a branch of the Irgun. And those 3 terrorist organizations is who founded and became the IDF. And all you have to do is read. All you have to do is read, and you can see it. It's one Google search. It is a cursory Google search away to see what Israel is, what they have done, what the relationship is. Now, truth be told, it does take some deeper digging to go beyond just the nation state of what Israel is. But even so, we're at the point where we didn't even need to talk about the Jewish fifth column. We're talking about an overt, extreme overreach that's being aided by a foreign nation, being aided by people who were voted to be representatives of our interest at some of the highest levels in the Senate, Tom Cotton and others. So on Tom Cotton specifically, Tom Cotton is the chairman of the Senate Select Intelligence Committee, meaning he has the most influence on this bill overall. And surely this isn't going to be a surprise at this point, but hello, Tom Cotton is a pro-Israel goy. Now, he calls himself a Methodist, but I would imagine he would consider himself a Zionist. And by all accounts, there's nothing, by all of his actions and behavioral patterns and what he has done, his relationships with Bill Kristol, of course he is. So, some of you may not know this, but Tom Cotton did actually take part, and he has received the Publius Fellowship from Claremont Institute while he was in college at Harvard. Tom Cotton actually also regularly speaks at both the Claremont Institute and the Manhattan Institute. Forgive me, I was forgetting it there for a second. And what is this Publius Fellowship? Well, it is a selective camp for rising conservatives, which basically just means it's a hand selection of people who are already on the neoconservative train, people who are already pro-Israel, and they essentially rope them in to give them something they can put on their resume. For one, I mean, the Claremont Institute is highly recognized. You can see Claremont Bro in many different bios if you go and check. And Tom Cotton, even in addition to that, he also attended a Claremont master's program afterwards, although he was only there for a year before he ended up going back to Harvard Law. He was more interested in doing Harvard Law. So Tom Cotton has been, and both been groomed by the individuals at the Claremont Institute, which I'll get to in a second, what even is Claremont. But he's also, for years, since the early 2000s, Tom Cotton has been getting groomed and mentored by Bill Kristol. Again, Bill Kristol being also a pro-Israel, neocon, shill, Jew. What is Claremont? The Claremont Institute essentially represents an institution. It is an institutional backing of Straussian thought, which we'll get to what a Straussian is here in a second. But the Claremont Institute, its two major investors, the two biggest donors of the Claremont Institute is Paul Singer and Peter Thiel. Okay, who are those guys? Well, Peter Thiel, the founder of Palantir, which is the surveillance system, and the father of things like Gotham. He also operates Anduril, Mithril, naming all of his companies after all these different things. But he is another one of these pro-Israel, surveillance system to defend the Jews, the all-seeing eye that betrays the user. Paul Singer, another huge pro-Israel Jew, who is much more closer to being a left-wing Jew, who's now, we're getting reports when we get to the J.D. Vance elements, but he's also another major donor of the Claremont Institute. So those are the two biggest funders, two pro-Israel individuals. And this also ropes in And the Claremont Institute is not limited to these two. The Claremont Institute has also seen the likes of some like Bronze Age pervert. It's also seen the likes of Barry Weiss, Yoram Hazony, Curtis Yarvin. All of them being Straussians. So, and for a better idea, the Claremont Institute was, if you're thinking back to like when we were in the early periods of watching before Donald Trump was elected, the Straussians were in the onset, they were the backers of Ron DeSantis. And now where are they all? Now they're all backing J.D. Vance. So the Claremont Institute was founded by Harry Jaffa. Harry Jaffa was a student of Leo Strauss. Leo Strauss was a student of, Zev Jabotinsky. And Zev Jabotinsky is a literal terrorist. We're going back in time, right? We're going back before the formation of the foremost nation state of Israel. Jabotinsky was one of the major influencers of the Irgun, which is one of the 3 terrorist organizations that founded Israel. So Strauss himself was mentored by Zev Jabotinsky, this pro-Israel, the pronunciation probably is off, I don't even care at this point. So Strauss is learning under Jabotinsky. Harry Jaffa is learning under Strauss. Strauss's main mission, as said explicitly by Harry Jaffa, is to explicitly make the world a safe place for Jews, to make the West a safe haven for Jews. Now, going back to Jabotinsky, some of what you would consider one of the progenitors of all of this, one of the founders of this, Jabotinsky, I don't even care. One of the founders of this revisionist Zionist school of thought, and being again one of the founders of the Irgun, their obvious overall mission was this, and as it's known now, the Greater Israel Project, the expansion of Israel into the surrounding territories, becoming bigger, becoming a greater nation than what it had been from what they were already fighting for, between the British and the Palestinians, forgive me. Jabotinsky, Jabba. We'll just call him Jabba. How about that? So, and again, you have these 3 different terrorist organizations. You have the Haganah, which actually was the one that's notable for actually escaping and not being tagged a terrorist organization. And then you have the Irgun and the Lehi, or the Lehi, and I'm always forgetting, the Stern Gang or something like that. Anyways, the Lehi were a separated branch. They were a fork of the Irgun. And they separated, and the reasons why they separated was not an overall ideological split. It was that the Lehi, which is commonly referred to if you listen to somebody like Ian Carroll or even Nick Fuentes, the Lehi is this group of pro-Zionist, pro-Israel Jews who were siding with Nazi Germany, and that was their ideological split because the Irgun viewed the Brits as being the main enemy of the Israeli state. Whereas, or forgive me, it was the Irgun viewed the Palestinians as the primary threat to the state of Israel. The Lehi disagreed. They said they thought and they believed that the British were the primary enemy to the nation state of Israel. So you have the Lehi who then forks off ever so slightly and is aiding and facilitating and helping Nazi Germany. And then all 3 of which become the IDF. All 3 of which then members of end up forming and becoming part of the government of what becomes the nation state of Israel. What was it again? Jabotinsky? Jabotinsky. Jabotinsky. What if I just purposely just start saying it completely wrong? That'd be fine with me. And so Jabotinsky one of the major Zionist influencers at the time, or influences on the overall Zionist project at the time, is what led to the Likud party, which is who Netanyahu now is a representative for. So you can go connect, 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 connect. So again, you have Jabotinsky, this terrorist, this Jewish terrorist, this Jewish Zionist terrorist, whose student was Leo Strauss, who by all accounts, we'll get to Straussian thought here in a second, but then his student was Harry Jaffa, and Harry Jaffa is who founded the Claremont Institute. The same Claremont Institute whose two biggest donors are Peter Thiel and Paul Singer. The same Claremont Institute that Tom Cotton both attended in the Pugilis Fellowship, as well as receiving the Statesmanship Award from, who he also speaks at events still regularly, as well as the Manhattan Institute, which is, again, another thing, but we'll get to that. So, Bonsky, Strauss, Jaffa, Claremont, Tom Cotton. So what is a Straussian? What does it mean to say Straussian thought? What is a Straussian? It's just basically another word for a Jewish nationalist. But Jewish nationalists are different compared to many of the other nationalists. And it's a slightly bit different, but you'll understand as we begin to explain here. What you'll notice is the Straussians, they're the brand of Jew that pushes for the ethno-state in Israel, but praises the diversity in America. Well, why is that? Why would one of these individuals, why would they be a nationalist for their own state? They'd be ethno-nationalists for their own state, but then push and praise the diversity in America, as well as any other nation for that matter, whether it be France or otherwise. Well, the reason being is because one of the major power dynamics, if not the major power dynamic of Israel, is the Jewish diaspora. What is the Jewish diaspora? The Jewish diaspora is the proliferation of all of these Jews, these pockets of Jews in all these other different countries. America being the largest, France being second, and then there are a few, and there are others as well. How does that provide power? Well, I'm sure many of you, if you've been paying attention and living in America for the past couple of years, have probably seen that at work. And how does it work? Well, the Jews who are in America, who rise to high-ranking positions of influence or come into access of mass amounts of capital, they use their influence and capital and money and finances to basically extract, to influence, to encourage the extraction of resources from said host nation to the parasite that is Israel. It is one of the most prominent, if not the most prominent, power mechanism that the nation state of Israel has. Which is why they have to explicitly and specifically disempower things like white nationalism. Well, why is that? Well, because if white nationalism rises, you can't have a concurrence of white nationalism and black nationalism and Jewish nationalism, because only one of them can be what makes up the nation. The white nationalism is that this is a nation for whites. Black nationalism says this is a nation for blacks. Jewish nationalism says this is a nation for Jews. So the reason why they have to be pro-diversity, anti-nationalism for anything in these host nations, is because it would necessitate the downfall of the Jewish power, of the Jewish diaspora. Meaning it would lose its fifth column, which is one of its primary elements of power, is to be able to influence and extract resources and, again, information, and any other foreign power can come in to Israel. And we see this in effect in America. That's why we're at war with Iran. You go back in history, you can see it much more notably in elements like with France, in terms of the backhanded negotiations they had with different nuclear elements. I think it was like that was in the 80s. It's been a while since I covered that. And the people who push this the most are people like Yoram Hazony. Yoram Hazony, who literally runs NatCon and his public-facing, puppet, which is like J.D. Vance, and J.D. Vance is a puppet for basically this entire thing. But they both agree on legal immigration for America. But they don't want legal immigration in America because they believe in diversity. They want the immigration in America because it continues the status quo. It allows for the prominence of said Jewish fifth column. It's how they thrive. So that's what a Straussian is. A Straussian is a Jewish nationalist. But a Jewish nationalist comes with this caveat that while they are a pro-Jewish nation, i.e. only one, i.e. Israel being an ethno-state, the secondary definition to that, or the more comprehensive definition to that, is that not only are they pro the ethno-state of Israel, they have to actively be against any nation, any ethno-state for anyone else. Because to move from that position would mean for them to weaken their Jewish diaspora in all these other nations that extract resources and funnel them to Israel. That's what Israel has been doing since I've been alive, and even beyond then. And Tom Cotton, being somebody who agrees with Straussian thought, someone who was literally selected, who was picked up and amplified, boosted by Bill Kristol, again, son of Irving Kristol, father of neoconservatism, neoconservatism just meaning Jewish reaction to the state of Israel. All these left-wing Jews jumping overboard, joining the right because their supreme principle, again, is being the defense of and the continued existence of their nation state of Israel. But they're not a monolith. They are not a monolith. Not a monolith. And reminder, not only is Tom Cotton connected to the Claremont Institute, Tom Cotton is also been a protege of Bill Kristol's for the last 20-some years. I think it's like 24, 25 years. They have had an extremely tight personal relationship with one another. And they have done each other some favors. So before we get to the relationship, though, who is Bill Kristol? Obviously, as I've said many times now, he is the son of Irving Kristol. Neoconservatism, obviously being this reaction. Irving Kristol, though, funded both Peter Thiel and Yoram Hazony, both individually, when they were trying to run and fund their college papers. So Peter Thiel, who was running the Stanford Review at the time at Stanford, and Yoram Hazony, who was running the Princeton Tory at Princeton, both received, although they were a couple years apart, both received funding by Irving Kristol. Why? I think, well, one could only imagine at this point why. Now, another added element inside of this, too, is going back to Bronze Age pervert, whose name is Qasim El-Amaru, had his paper supervised, his PhD thesis paper, and again, he's also connected to the Claremont Institute along with Barry Weiss and everyone else, as we've listed before, too. He had his PhD thesis and some of his other writings as well, supervised by Harvey Mansfield. Harvey Mansfield being someone who is in league with Bill Kristol. Another one of these connections, and I think the nature of that relationship is that Harvey Mansfield is a bit of a both a peer and a protege as well of Bill Kristol. So on to Tom Cotton and Bill Kristol's relationship. Tom Cotton, again, going all the way back to the early 2000s, was primarily shaped around their agreement on foreign policy and their shared foreign policy. So Tom Cotton has written many and penned many open letters in his career. Largely a lot of them being about the nuclear treaty with Iran, warnings to Iran, overall just hawkishness in general on foreign policy. But Tom Cotton was the one who initiated the contact. Tom Cotton reached out via email for, I can only imagine, in correspondence for the boosting and for publication relations in connection to the Weekly Standard, which is a publication of Bill Kristol's. Bill Kristol said, and I quote, saw Tom Cotton as a kindred spirit, someone who they agreed, someone who'd be worthy to amplify. And both of them were students of this said and same Harvey Mansfield, who was at Harvard, where Tom Cotton both went to law school. So at this point, you can probably begin to see like this gigantic network. It is just Jew, mentor, protege, student, money funneling, you help me, I help you, all of this. And what's at the core of this is their primary and supreme principle being Israel. So Cotton, while he was serving in the army, he later had ended up moving closer to Capitol, closer to DC. And that's when they moved away from email communications. Tom Cotton started meeting him at the Mayflower, I guess it's some hotel, having dinner and chopping it up with Bill Kristol, sharing their agreement on what they feel and believe about the foreign policy of this country. And Kristol returned the favor, and this was actually the opening favor. Bill Kristol used the Weekly Standard to heavily boost and amplify Tom Cotton, and also further there, and I'll read this excerpt here, Kristol's group, the Emergency Committee for Israel, spent nearly $1 million in dark money ads, supporting Cotton's 2014 run for Senate. I also forgot, the power chat's unlinked, isn't it? Let me check it. So they have this relationship, and as it goes on, years later, Bill Kristol eventually decides, you know what, we're going to boost this Tom Cotton for a run for Congress to the tune of $1 million in dark money ads. And that would have been back in 2014 for his run for Senate. Now, a year later, Tom Cotton pens what was probably considered his most famous open letter, which is to Iran, which is warning them against their nuclear deal, or you're not going to allow to have a nuclear weapon, basically repeating the rhetoric, the line that, Iran is not allowed to have a nuclear weapon, down with the Ayatollah. And that was also praised and amplified and boosted by Bill Kristol. You move on to 2017, Tom Cotton returns the favor by hiring who? None other than Joseph Kristol, who is Bill Kristol's son, to be his legislative director. So you can clearly see that Tom Cotton may not, up until this point, has been getting talked about as being as deeply embedded into this overall fifth column of Israel as I think he should have been. Tom Cotton, at least as far as I can see, and from my understanding of just reading the surface level news, is rather rarely talked this in depth about in terms of its overall connections. But I think even after discovering and reading through just some of that, it is not a shock or a surprise in any amount of why this man is the author of the bill that is forcing our country to share information with Israel. He needs, and I restate this again for what I feel like is the third or fourth time now, he needs drugged by his tie or collar in front of Lady Justice and charged with treason. If not, at least him at the bare minimum, the author of the bill and the chairman of the Senate Select Intelligence Committee. It is violently treasonous. What Tom Cotton is, what he is supporting, and what he is trying to do. Beyond that, Tom Cotton also has even more extenuating relationships, even further than just the Claremont elements. He also has a strong relationship with the Manhattan Institute, which, guess who funds that one? Paul Singer. Another, I don't know, a pro-Israel Jew. And Cotton speaks at multiple events at the Manhattan Institute, which also was the institute that is led by, I believe it's got Lomez as a part of it, Christopher Rufo is a part of it. All of these pretend pro-American, pro-white individuals who, at the drop of a hat, will abandon those positions and cope and seethe at anything that is actually American nationalism, anything that is actually white nationalism. Now, Paul Singer, let's just go back to, I don't know, a couple of months ago. Paul Singer joined Miriam Adelson against Thomas Massie to fund him into the tune of spending millions of dollars to oust him from a seat. Why? Because Thomas Massie was challenging Israel. Because Thomas Massie was wielding whatever he could against the Epstein files. Now, I would agree with Nick. I do think that he should have actually gone a lot harder than what he did in terms of being expletive and directed. But that's what this network is. That's who Paul Singer is. That's who Miriam Adelson is. That's who Peter Thiel is. That's who Tom Cotton is. That's who the Claremont Institute represents. They represent this continuation, this evolution, this do anything we have to, bend and adapt to whatever position we must to ensure and continue the leeching and the extraction of American resources and influences, money and power to the nation state of Israel to continue their advance towards the greater Israel project. Why the fuck is Tom Cotton still in office right now? Clint Russell is correct that if the founding fathers were aware of what is happening right now, I can only imagine, for one, on one hand, they would be writing much stronger language in the Constitution, but secondarily to that,
You don't seem to understand. Earth isn't yours to conquer.
Anonymous sent $3 since Republicans love to demonize trans people. Can any of you tell me how many trans people blocked the release of the Epstein files and how many white cisgender Trump Republicans blocked the release of the Epstein file?
trans opinion detected, entire opinion rejected. We're talking about real things here, man. You need to take that wishy-washy transgender bullshit. I mean, I will tell you, to be honest with you, I do pray for you. I pray wholeheartedly that you wake up from this delusion that you find yourself wrapped in. I say that actually with love. I do appreciate the super chat wholeheartedly. I do thank you very much for that. But to even engage with the framing of what you have put forward as it's any kind of defense of transgender ideology overall is just insane. And can someone tell me, I guess there's like two, I think, is there two trans Congress people overall? And I guess them voting against, so what you're saying is the reason they voted against the Epstein files is because they're trans? Like, no, I wouldn't even agree with the framing of that at all. I appreciate the power chat, but you need help. So moving on from there, we have this final kind of connection, the Manhattan Institute, these extenuating connections. How did I don't know. I don't know. It's either Daily Riot or Rhetorically Defective. It's one of those guys. They broke the MOU. That's funny. But wholeheartedly, if you're still here, like, reach out to Jesus Christ. He loves you. He loves you as you are. You are not broken. You do not need to change yourself. You don't need to mutilate yourself. You are what you were born as. And you need to appreciate that. Not spend every ounce of your life fighting against it. So here's what I wanted to move to too. This next thing that I would move to is we're going to catch up on where Paul Singer is at now with JD Vance and what's JD Vance doing to appease some of these connections. And so with all of that being said, the main gist I wanted to get at was, for one, Tom Cotton should be charged with treason. The actions of the enforcement of this bill in its entirety, is a treasonous act against America's sovereignty and our own best interest. But going even beyond there, I wanted to also show you that Tom Cotton is not alone in this. Tom Cotton is attached and a part of a bigger and broader network that has been working and doing these things for a long time. I also wanted to extend that to show you, well, what is this group? What do they represent? This group represents Straussian thought. What is Straussian thought? It is Jewish nationalism. What is Jewish nationalism? It is the ethno-state for Israel at the expense of host nations and other Western nations, so they can extract resources to continue their push and pull for a greater nation state that they believe they deserve. And going even further than that too, there's more than just Tom Cotton. It gets a lot bigger and deeper than that. Pause. Now moving on to JD Vance and his behind the scenes working on relationships with Paul Singer, Miriam Adelson, Jeff Yass, and more. So here's this cover put up on screen. Oh my gosh. If this jumps away from me one more time, and then it loads on the other page, that's crazy. So here's this. Paul Singer is in the Manhattan Institute, right? So we largely covered a lot of the Claremont Institute here. I will make it a point to cover a bit more of the Manhattan Institute as well. But again, Nick Fuentes covers it really well. Basil also covers this very well. For those of you who have access to X, go to Basil Bazillion Dot, and you can simply just search his tweets for either Claremont Institute or Manhattan Institute, and you will find treasure troves of connections and information that is very valuable. But beyond there, I wanted to pay attention to this specific excerpt of JD Vance working behind the scenes, and this is back from April, by the way, working behind the scenes with pro-Israel megadonor Paul Singer to raise money for the RNC, and has also been cultivating ties with Miriam Adelson, Jeff Yass, Stephen Schwartzman, and John Paulson. So here's this excerpt.
So JD Vance has been the RNC finance chair for the last year plus, and he's been using that to basically position himself to run for president next year. His allies think it's likely that he's going to run. They're preparing to run. I can tell you from talking to people in his orbit over the last couple of weeks, they would be surprised if he did not. And he's beginning to make plans to do so. And one of the ways he's doing this is by raising money for the RNC, which, in addition to helping raise the committee $60 million, is also putting JD Vance in front of a lot of people who could be pretty helpful to him next year.
And like we covered, not to pause it too much, but like we covered, JD Vance being the one who's kind of leading the RNC fund collecting, now they're at $70 million, which actually is kind of small compared to what Senator John Thune apparently has. But still, JD Vance is doing the work to get the money rolling in to back up the RNC for obviously his 2028 run.
Who exactly are those people?
So there are billionaires like Paul Singer, who is a Republican mega donor who actually worked pretty hard to make sure J.D. Vance was not the vice president a year or two ago. Paul Singer is a J.D. person. He's gotten close with J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance is also close to Elon Musk, as we've sort of have seen them, get to know each other pretty well over the last year, I'd say. J.D. Vance has also been meeting with people like Peter Thiel. We reported that Thiel and Vance had a meal together at the vice president's residence a few weeks ago. This is all happening, of course, Katie, behind the scenes. Like, no, we're not seeing J.D. Vance do these things. Like, we're seeing him in Iowa, we're seeing him in Hungary. But he is not doing these things solely out of the goodness of his heart. He wants to raise money for the RNC, but he's also pretty aware that people like Peter Thiel and Paul Singer could be pretty helpful if he runs next year against maybe someone like Marco Rubio.
Is he somebody that, or is he right now the favorite among the billionaire donor Republican class? Or is there a feeling that, I don't know, someone like Marco Rubio might be better? If there are concerns about J.D. Vance among these folks, what are they?
Yeah, I think there are concerns. I mean, I think there are folks in the kind of more pro-Israel community who are concerned about Vance's ties to Tucker Carlson. They believe that someone like Marco Rubio would be more, in line with kind of the traditional, at least traditional pre-Trump foreign policy positions.
Now, the reason why I referenced it happening in April, the reason why I find that to be important is because fast forward to last week, the news reporting now is that, by all appearances, it looks as if, and this is from, I believe it was the New York Times or Politico, I'm forgetting who reported this. It was the Daily Mail. One of those three. I can't remember. I'll read too much. One of those outlets reported that actually what it looks like now is the most likely scenario is that Rubio will actually be running with J.D. Vance, not against him, but on the ticket with Vance. So the reason why they're kind of even talking about it now is because a couple of months ago, they were operating off the information that Trump had been continually floating out both Rubio and J.D. Vance to the top brass, to the donors at these private meetings, these banquets, these events. And the reporting at the time was showing that near unanimously, they kept all of these pro-Israel, these mega donors were wanting Rubio. And again, near unanimously. But fast forward to now it's looking like Rubio and Vance are running together, as if they have joined the efforts together. Now, he mentions Tucker Carlson, and we know Tucker Carlson, it is a mirage. Now, to say that we understand the extent of all the agendas of Tucker Carlson would be, no, I couldn't tell you that. But we can guess. What we do know is that Tucker Carlson talks to Peter Thiel about every major life decision he has. Before he makes a major life decision, he apparently runs it by Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel, the sole groomer and mentor, and who pushed, boosted, and amplified, and could largely be accredited for the entire reason J.D. Vance is even a thing, both financing his Senate run and also mediating between Trump and Vance, because for those who forget, Vance used to be a never Trumper. Vance used to liken Trump to Hitler, to ultimately get the endorsement by Trump for the Senate run, getting Vance in there, and then Tucker Carlson coming in, along with many others, whispering in the ear, going to the White House, talking to President Trump, and saying, you must select Vance as your vice president. You need assassination insurance. But who's Peter Thiel again? Major funder of the Claremont Institute. The same Claremont Institute, which is it is a institution, a booster of Straussian thought, of Jewish nationalism. That same Peter Thiel. Really not sure what the concerns of the pro-Israel crowd would have with this. And that's where you begin to understand that so much of it is a mirage. A lot of it is smoke and mirrors. And part of the reason of that on J.D. Vance's case is because J.D. Vance is literally straddling the fence, spinning on it, licking it up, bouncing on it, spinning around, doing backflips on it, because he's trying to appease as much as possible from all crowds. Now, this goes a bit more into the Rockbridge Network, which is another private network that was co-founded by J.D. Vance. Also gets private meetups from Tucker Carlson, Kid Rock, Jake Paul, as we found out a couple weeks ago, which is an invite-only private event, a conference, a group of bigwigs. Also, believe I think it's David Sachs is also attached to this too. It's David Sachs or David Frum. I have to look at it. And what do they want to do? They want to do everything in their power to establish a political coalition that adapts and moves and simply can continue for a long-term power grab, operating with a mathematical percentage of maintaining a 55% approval, if you will, or maintaining a coalition that will be able to always receive like 55% of the votes, 55% of the audience, of the crowd, of the consent. And so all in all, J.D. Vance is doing this dance where he is actively continuing and being the puppet for Teal, for Palantir, which will ultimately, if and when, and hopefully not, but if J.D. Vance is elected, J.D. Vance will be the bridge that allows these Palantir contracts to go from 0 to 100, be even further deeply embedded into the government, as well as continuing its operations in Israel. But also having to mediate and not show his entire hand because he's trying to appease the MAGA group, the MAGA crowd, which at some point, many years ago, used to stand for making America great again, which was many years ago, was a America First group. It was a group predicated on America First. America First. That will be our credo. And so he's got to appease all of these people. And the reason being is because if he's going to be making this 2028 run, off the back of also experiencing the Iran war, which many people already got a bitter taste in their mouth, very regretful of their vote for Trump already, he's doing all of this performance, if you will, is being done in such a way so that he can maintain the best favorability rating that he possibly can. Not going too far in either direction, but riding the fence, straddling the fence. So he doesn't piss off enough people. Like, no one's really actively rooting for him, but he's also, not too many people are actually that pissed off at him. And who's supporting Vance? Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, John Doyle, Patrick Casey, Captive Dreamer, all of them. It's all connected. It is one big club, and you and I are not in it. So, but go ahead and finish playing this out.
So I don't think those people are excited about J.D. Vance, but Vance, and our reporting that I did with my colleague Shane Goldmacher today, has been working to neutralize those concerns. Someone like Miriam Adelson, who is you would think on paper this person should be a Marco Rubio person. Adelson is very pro-Israel. J.D. Vance, these Israel donors have questions about Vance's ties to the state of Israel. But J.D. Vance and Usha Vance have gotten to know Miriam Adelson pretty well, in part because of his role as the RNC finance chair. So even though there are some doubts about Vance amongst the billionaire class, he very quietly and very savvily has been working to neutralize those people, and maybe not turn them into J.D. Vance mega donors, but make sure that they're not haters. And I should say, Marco Rubio has said publicly a couple times now that he's not going to run against Vance, or at least has strongly implied he won't do so. So I think, Vance may be a favorite with these people just because it's unclear at this point, at least as of this spring, whether there will be credible opposition to him from other people.
Alas, the Claremont Institute, the Jewish Fifth Column, the unseen operation, the behind-the-scenes operation, Tom Cotton, Vance, all of it. And what's crazy about this is this kind of really only scratches the surface. Like, so much of this is like only looking through the perspective of Tom Cotton in this recent legislation. There's so many other ways you can look at this, so many other connections, so many other things that you can backtrack and look at historically and match up and walk to and see. Mentor, protege, influence here, money funneled here, and it all falls into this bucket, which is pro-Israel. Pro-Israel, Jewish ethno-nationalism, while the same people who are boosting that are telling you that America is a proposition, it is an idea. It's It's made greater. America thrives on its diversity. That's who these people are. So that story being covered, and I didn't even actually expected that it was going to be going this long, to do the 90 minutes just on that story alone. But it does bear repeating, and it does bear paying attention to. And these are the things that you need to be paying attention to, is these connections. And this is why the articulation by somebody like Nick Fuentes is so needed, so vital. Because I agree with Basil on this. Well, what other take seller, what other pundit is going to the lengths to talk about this? To explain to you front to back these connections, where they come from, who has the knowledge just at the top of his hat. Like, I had to sit here and prepare notes for hours just to be able to do this story today. Now, granted, I take a lot of notes, and also, too, I read a lot, which is why my pronunciations aren't always correct. I typically prefer to read about things than I do have to, to listen about them. Also, good to see you, Zeb. Oh, yeah, by the way, Zeb did get his channel back. For those who might have missed it, Zeb Boykin did get his channel back. That is actually him. That's actually Zeb Boykin there. Believe it or not. But it is good to see you back, man. I'm glad you got the channel back. All of that being said, it is an imperative that we have this refined understanding of what this problem is. Not just saying, oh, Israel bad, not just saying Jews bad, not just saying, in order for us to be taken seriously at the highest levels, it's going to require the refined understanding, a level of mastery that you can argue these points. You can draw the connections. That's what is needed. That is what is elite human capital, is someone who has the competence to levy these arguments out in a way that is meaningful, instructive, and gets the point across. Hence, why I support NJF and the overall Groyper movement. Perfect time for Zeb to come in too, since we're basically done with that story. You missed it. Zeb, you missed the story, man. I can't believe you missed the story. I will say I had two other items I wanted to cover today. One being the Ohio data centers, but I think I'm going to save that data centers for tomorrow. I do want to take a look at one of these reset episodes that was sent in by Mr. Moss, but we'll do that on Kick. I think for the time remaining, we've got about 20 minutes left on YouTube. I do want to take a look at the failed operation from Brad Parscale, who, again, Brad Parscale is a literal foreign agent for Israel. He registered under FARA in September of 2025. And now we're getting the information out that Eyal Yacobi, one of these incessant, annoying Jews on X, who, if anyone was here when we were reacting to the millennials versus boomers, or no, it was the America First versus MAGA, Eyal Yacobi was actually even directly challenged by Clinton Russell for, are you being paid for these opinions? Are you being paid to hold what you're doing? He denied it. But the news broke earlier today that no, indeed, actually, Eyal Yacobi was actually a part of this operation, a part of Brad Parscale's operation. Or probably more accurately, his firm, which is called, I think it's called Clock Tower X or Clock Tower LLC, was hired to be part of this operation to push these Israeli talking points. Eyal Yacobi, many of you may know from his presence on X. He's one of the bigger accounts, very similar to Max Nardo, I believe is his name too. These pro-Israel Jews. I think Eyal Yacobi, I can't remember if Eyal Yacobi served in the IDF or not, and I don't even care. And then that's who's representing Make America Great Again. That's who's left in the MAGA movement. And then you have Gavin McInnes too. So I'll cover the Brad Parscale operation, although I will say I was only loosely and only newly and recently became aware of it, so I covered it at the very end. I do have a Telegram post I'd like to go to. I think explores a lot of it. But also, I do want to extend it to anybody else. For any questions, feel free to ask me anything. I know it seems like we're getting a lot more people in here that we typically wouldn't be seeing. So if anyone is here who is new, feel free to ask the question, fire away. I try to be as knowledgeable on these things as I possibly can be. But to move over to the Brad Parscale foreign operation, because House Hyde is in that chat. That's funny. Thoughts on Israel? Wow, okay. That's a good one. My thoughts on Israel. I love it. I love every second that we spend here. I love that America has been reduced to a resource. We are basically feeding grounds for Jews. That's what we've become. We've basically been rendered as cattle. They come up by every so often and harvest what they need, sometimes more than we would like, but everyone goes along with it. Everyone loves it. It doesn't take much to go and see this. It really doesn't take much to see and connect the dots. Maybe it takes a push. Maybe it takes a little bit of getting past the, everyone's all equal and this blank slate and egalitarianism, which is all bogus and bullshit. Maybe once you get past that, most people can recognize the tribalism and the in-group preferences and the interracial and inter-religious dynamics that are at play. And again, we're just scratching some of the surface on the Israeli elements here, on like the founding of the country, some of their actual, maybe more state-level motives and motions. We haven't begun to start with the religious element of it. What is my go-to Raising Cane's order? That's crazy. Caniac combo. Is that the one that gives you 6 pieces of chicken? Whatever the biggest one is, dude. Pause. Whatever the biggest one is, which is like, it used to be like $10.99. Now it's like, I don't even know what it is. It's like what, $14 or something? I'm not in Columbus anymore, so I barely even see Cane's. And Luke says, Atlas, I have bad news. A doctor I saw told me it was critical that I gain a little weight. Devastating news, but 10 pounds at least. Well, how tall are you? If you were sitting, you said you were sitting at like what, 128, 126? If you're taller, I would imagine if you're like around, if you're even like 5'10" or higher, you should probably be at least like 135. Any book recommendations? The Bible, number 1. I would also recommend. There's many books I would recommend. I would recommend the Faith and Heritage anthology, as well as The Sword of Christ by Giles Corey. Faith and Heritage is a bit of a different story with the authorship. It's written by many different authors. I think for a lot of people, it might be easier to understand, or it might be, what's the best way to say this? It might just be more intriguing and interesting, especially if you are a Christian. It might be specifically to you more intriguing, more interesting to go down the rabbit hole through the Christian lens rather than the State of Israel lens, the historical lens, if you will. I mean, both are historical, but one being a bit more like government and, service level political, the other being religious, passionate, impassioned. Well, I would say, on Hitler specifically, Hitler did do some things that obviously rendered what was going to be the destruction of the country into a major economic engine in short span. I think his tactics and how he did that in the early phases actually should be looked at once more. Not his overall. Obviously Hitler did commit atrocities. But when you read some of the opening strategies, or some of the first acts he took when he was in power, I think we need to take a look at some of those and why they were so effective. Why would removing Jews from financial institutions all of a sudden make your country one of the most well-oiled economies in the world? There's some looking into. So you can keep the questions rolling. I am going to move over to the Brad Parscale story. I have this actually put up from the Counterintelligence Global Telegram, which I thought did a good job of putting the story together. To pull this over for you guys to be able to read. It says Israeli officials are pissed after Brad Parscale's massive pro-Israel influencer campaign fails spectacularly. After the United States and Iran agreed to a ceasefire deal on June 17th, a senior U.S. official was monitoring the online reaction when they noticed something surprising. President Donald Trump's aides had expected his supporters to celebrate the agreement. Instead, online influencers in Trump's MAGA movement were excoriating it on social media. One shared an Israeli op-ed titled, "You could have been the greatest president of all time, but you failed." Several posted the same video of Qatar's prime minister appearing to snub Vice President J.D. Vance in Israel, arguing it showed regional powers dismissing the Trump administration's naivete. Others accused Trump of surrendering before achieving his stated objectives of eliminating Iran's nuclear program. Many of the posts appeared almost simultaneously, with similarities in language and tone. The Trump official who noticed this, began collecting screenshots and came to believe it was not a coincidence. Tracing tweets by prominent members of the online right, this said official came to believe there was an unlikely figure at the center of all this criticism: Trump's former presidential campaign manager and digital guru, Brad Parscale. And from what I do understand, he was put away. He was pushed out. Thank you for the gifted membership, A World Champion. W's in chat for World Champion. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Brad Parscale, from what I was reading, not only did he register in September of 2025 under the FARA Act as a foreign agent for Israel, what we also have from Brad Parscale is that there was some kind of instance, and I didn't read all the full details, but from what I did read, there was some instance in 2020 where ultimately they seized his firearms. He had some kind of like mental breakdown. He was threatening to harm himself. And I believe it stemmed from a dispute he had with his wife or girlfriend, one of the two. But Brad Parscale is somebody who has been since around 2016, maybe even a little bit before there, has been actively being a part of Trump's digital campaign team. Although no longer. He was let go in 2020. Did the interview just drop? That's huge. We'll check it out on Kick, actually. I guess we'll change gears and go watch that on Kick directly after this. But to continue the story, last September, the global ad agency Havas hired Parscale's firm, Clock Tower X, to conduct a digital campaign on behalf of the state of Israel. According to Foreign Agents Registration Act, FARA, filings reviewed by Time. Under the agreement, Parscale's operation will produce 100 original pieces of content each month, with at least 80% aimed at Gen Z audiences across TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and podcasts. In a services agreement draft included in the filing, Parscale also pledged to amplify the campaign across social media and through, quote, integration of narrative messaging into Salem Media Network properties and aligned distribution channels, referring to the Christian conservative broadcasting and publishing company where he serves as chief strategy officer. Parscale vowed the effort would produce at least 50 million digital impressions per month, as well as influence how AI tools such as OpenAI's ChatGPT, Anthropic's Claude, and Google's Gemini characterized Israel in the war. For all of this, Israel agreed to pay Clock Tower X $1.5 million a month. Now, publicly, the campaign was framed as an effort to combat rising anti-Semitism online. An Israeli foreign ministry official familiar with the arrangement says there was another strategic aim: preventing young conservatives from turning against Israel. While Parscale acknowledges that the operation was intended to prevent young conservatives from drifting away from Israel, he says neither he nor his firms played any role. Thank you for the follow on Kick.
Just followed on Kick.
I appreciate that. In turning opinion against Trump's objectives. 3 people familiar with the campaign describe a messaging operation run through a network of interconnected firms overseen by Parscale or other firms he owns or created, such as Campaign Nucleus and Influenceable, in which he now owns a minority stake. Through private group chats, they say conservative influencers receive suggested language for posts on social media sites such as X, Instagram, and TikTok. They were then compensated based on the impressions and engagement their content generated. On its website, Clock Tower X says it has developed an influencer ecosystem that includes managed networks that amplify narratives through credible distributed voices. And so you can see, to go back, oh, it's bait, you fell for it? That's funny. That's funny. All right, mods, ban him. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding, but that is your first fun word. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I couldn't do that, man. I just wanted to stop to say, you can see how we are only barely scratching the surface by just looking at Tom Cotton. And he's a minority figure. Although he is a senator with name brand recognition, he does possess power and influence. He is still one of many elements and items here. No, don't time him out. Don't time him out. He's good. I was entirely joking. Going Ips is cool. He's good. He was trying to help. I appreciate it, mods, though. Thank you. But to continue this, though, it remains unclear how much Parscale's outfits paid creators as part of the Israel campaign. Forgive me. Another recent influenceable campaign offered influencers a base payment of $2,250 plus $1 for every 1,000 views, up to 2 million views, allowing influencers to earn as much as $4,250 per post. Now, if anybody remembers, Influenceable, in some of its previous campaigns, Influenceable also operated the NJF, it's a Fed campaign, attacking Nicholas J. Fuentes. Just for a reminder. The Parscale-led effort continues, but neither the Trump admin nor the Israelis appear happy about how it's going. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government had hired Parscale to improve the nation's standing among conservatives, only to watch support continue to erode on the American right and across the broader U.S. electorate. Quote, "We are pissed at Brad Parscale," says the Israeli official familiar with the arrangement, who spoke on condition of anonymity. I'm probably saying that wrong too, because they were not authorized to speak publicly. He was supposed to make things better. We have paid him lots of money. But what did he do with it? Things have only gotten worse. And to bring your attention back to Eyal Jacoby, I'm sure if I just literally just type in his name here. Forgive me. Not, it's going to go into his profile. Oh, come on. This is from AF Post. Now, AF Post is not one of us, by the way, but I will read this headline. They say, to the surprise of nobody, Eyal Jacoby, a Jewish Ivy League student, is named as one of the influencers paid by Parscale to boost pro-Israel content among young people. This is attached in reference to this. I think this is one I bookmarked here. Thank you. Yes, this is from Alex Brusewitz. They say yesterday, Time reported that right-wing influencers were being paid by Brad Parscale-linked firms to combat anti-Semitism. Time has updated their story after pushback from Eyal Jacoby to say that influencers like Eyal are actually being paid by a Parscale-linked firm to promote numerous Israel-related issues. So he's like, no. It's not just anti-Semitism. It's all these other pro-Israel issues. It's more than just anti-Semitism. Alex Brusewitz writes that I'm glad they corrected the story, much more revealing. Y'all should immediately disclose what campaigns and posts related to Israel he has been paid for. And he has it highlighted down here. An official with Influenceable says Jacoby has participated in numerous campaigns on issues related to Israel. So, alas, I say all of this to hopefully provide information, understanding between both the Brad Parscale firm as well as the Tom Cotton story, to connect it all and show you just how excessive and just how ubiquitous this problem is. Yeah, Jewish spies, Jewish agents, agents for Israel, Mossad agents, whatever you even want to call them. This country is filled with them. And not only are we filled with them directly, we're also filled with those who are backing the institutions to continue to push the school of thought, such as Straussian thought, picking up individuals like Tom Cotton. And all in all, the bigger item, to be more specific here, is that Section 622, as authored by Tom Cotton, and anyone who supports it, is a traitor to this country, is a traitor to the interest of America, is a traitor to the ideas and the foundation, what makes America America. They are traitors to all of it. These people are not fundamentalists. They are perverting what this country is. They are subverting this country. They should be treated as the enemy agents for the foreign nation they are. And my Lord, it could not get more explicit than what Tom Cotton's put in the language of the bill that is Section 622, that essentially forces the president to accept it for what it is and puts up just intense and extreme statutory and procedural barriers to prevent the shared and full-blown access and merging, on one hand, of the American military with Israel, and on the second hand, the intelligence and national security and information, all of it, our intelligence agencies with Israel as well. Forcing it. I appreciate everybody for stopping by. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate that. Above all, Christ is King, always. That is the truth. And if you can hang on to any truth, hang on to that. Jesus Christ is King. Jesus Christ is God. Jesus Christ is Lord. I do hope that I can continue to be better at articulating many of these elements. I do try my best to go out of my way to be able to research these things and connect the dots and explain them in a way that is not boring people to death, if you will. But I do appreciate all the support. So everybody who sent in a power chat, thank you greatly. Even the individual who is pushing for transgenderism, I do appreciate that. What I said earlier still stands. So, without further ado, we are going to be moving over to the Kick stream. And on the Kick stream, we're going to be taking a look at a recent conversation that was sent in and submitted by Mr. Moss, a member here of the community, that refers to some of the motives and moves that China has been making to. And it will be my first time hearing to it, actually. I actually did not end up getting a chance to listen to it beforehand. But we'll be reacting in real time. So Rebecca Blondes, Cameron McGregor will be hearing what they have to say, what information they are talking about over China, and it'll just be overall chill. So with that, again, I appreciate you guys as always. I'll see you over on Kick. And since we can't do deportations, the Trump administration won't allow us. They won't let it. Democrats are too powerful, they said. No deportations. Everybody all of a sudden in MAGA said they love the immigrants. We love Chinese students to the tune of almost millions of them. More third worlders, please. Seems that MAGA is pro-rape now. That's one way you could describe it. Sad what it has become. But since we can't do deportations, we'll settle for impeachments. So voting for the blue wave in 2026, I hope every Democrat wins who's running in the midterms in 2026. I hope they can get every ounce of committee power and investigation power, and they take J.D. Vance and Trump and company to absolute town, up and down for investigating for enrichment, for general corruption, all of it. Chrissy Noem, Pam Bondi, Dan Bongino, Kash Patel, every single one of them. I have no problem, qualm at all for any single one of them being tried or convicted and impeached. But with that, for the women, any women over 150 pounds, you are being shot from a cannon to Israel. I will do it myself, no questions asked. You have no say in the matter. It is your body, my choice. And for all the women between 125 and 150 pounds, this is your 90-day notice to lose the weight, or you too will be shot from a cannon to Israel. I'll see you guys on Kick. Give me a couple minutes to switch everything over, but I appreciate you all for being here. And for those who aren't following over to Kick, you definitely should, though. Have a good rest of your night. I'll see you guys tomorrow.
Get up and get out. Get out. Get out.
I have a question for you.
Say Christ is Lord. Say Christ is Lord. Say it. You say Christ is Lord. Get out. Get out. Christ is Lord.